Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever time of day it is that you're listening to this. So we're going to do this a little bit different. The Come Follow Me says that you don't have to stay in these chapters for studying the Psalms. If you want to study other things, you absolutely can within Psalms, right? That's the point. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to start off by listing a bunch of Psalms that I really like. There's actually going to be a reel that will go with this that you'll see on Instagram. So I recommend going and checking that out. It's just at donica.contour to find it. And so I suggest you look them up if you want to, or you can go look at that reel. That will have some of them on there as well. And then we're going to talk about 2 sets of scripture, and that'll be it. So here are the scriptures. If you want to write them down, whatever, get a pen and paper, pause for dramatic effect, and we'll get listed them. I'm just going to list them off. Again, this is all in Psalms. Chapter 19, verses 7 through 11. Chapter 19, verse 14. Chapter 20, verse 7. Chapter 23, verse 1. Chapter 23, verse 4. Chapter 24, verse 1. Chapter 25, verse 4, chapter 25, verse 15, chapter 25, verse 17, chapter 27, verse 1, chapter 27, verse 3, chapter 27, verse 14. Now, obviously there's a lot more chapters, a lot more Psalms I didn't mention, but I'd love to hear what some of your favorites are. So I'm going to post that reel on Instagram. Go comment there and tell me what your favorite Psalms are, if I missed what your favorite one. So we're actually going to talk about Jesus. I was thinking about this as I was going through Esther, as I was going through some of the other things, and I kind of, somewhere along the line of doing this, I kind of forgot that the whole point of this podcast is to focus on Christ, right? Like that's the whole point is finding Christ, finding the meat and potatoes. So that's what I want to talk about today, are these particular Psalms. So it's chapter 22, verse 1. In this Psalm, it says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And of course, we recognize this as among being the last words that Christ has ever spoken, but the Psalms were written before Christ. So when Christ says that on the cross, he's actually fulfilling prophecy, which I thought was really cool. I didn't know that. And then there's a couple more. It's chapter 22 still, verses 16 and 18. And there's a variety of verses within this whole section that are all bits of prophecy about how Christ will be treated, being nailed, being spit upon, having his clothes rent from him, having lots cast for his things. And I just loved how we have this before Christ, right? We have this before him. And I think sometimes it's really easy for me, especially these days, to kind of look back and be like, well, yeah, of course they knew because that all happened a long time ago, forgetting that the time span between the Psalms being written and Christ actually being crucified was a lot of time. And I think sometimes we see prophecies being fulfilled, or we see them being prophesied by our prophet, our modern day prophets. And I think sometimes it's really easy for us to kind of dismiss it a little bit as like, yeah, right. Okay, well, whatever. But I feel like especially in these times, as we watch the world go through the coming of Christ, as we're getting closer and closer and closer to that, we're going to see more and more of these prophecies kind of coming to pass, particularly in Revelations and stuff. And I think ultimately the point of all the Psalms, right, is all pointing us back to Christ. The point of all the scriptures of the whole point of church, the whole point of the gospel is to point us towards Christ, because ultimately he will guide us through all of this. The title for this particular lesson in Come Follow Me is The Lord is My Shepherd. That's the psalm that they decided to title this section. And I was thinking about shepherds and how a shepherd doesn't prevent the sheep from going through the storms. He doesn't necessarily prevent the sheep from getting lost, because sheep are stubborn and like to do their own thing sometimes and will go get lost. The sheep still make their own choices. They still have to get, they still get attacked by wolves sometimes. They still are in terrible weather. They still fall off of cliffs. There are all these things that still happen to the sheep, just due to the nature of being sheep and living outside. And how the shepherd, while not always preventing all these things, if we listen to the guidance of the shepherd, we can miss some of these things. We may not fall off that cliff. We may not get attacked by the wolves, but we have to be willing to follow the shepherd. The shepherd just being there doesn't prevent things. We have to be willing to act and do as he says. And that includes the little things of reading our scriptures every day and saying our prayers, saying thoughtful prayers every day. I am guilty of falling into the habit of prayer number 12, before bed. And I've been trying to be really more intentional about what I'm saying. And I find that I'm still saying a lot of the same things, but I feel like it's different because I'm thinking about them more as opposed to just kind of rattling them off, if that makes any sense. I really am grateful for my family. I really am glad that I have this gospel. I really am grateful for my husband and my children and our home and the opportunity we have to raise our children, the opportunity I have to be home with our children and to teach them the gospel and teach them to speak of Christ and look at Christ and all the things. Anyway, so just kind of want to talk about that today, and I'll leave you with that, and I will talk to you next week.